Our house looks like a horticultural bomb went off. We have plants in the kitchen window, on the ledge between the kitchen and dining room, on shelves in the dining room, the living room, the guest room, the upstairs bathroom. I counted some 30 plants in various states of sprawl or dormancy. And that number grew last week when I brought some of my potted plants inside. The wind was huffing and puffing and had blown down our patio umbrella, which in turn landed on the pot that houses my 5-year-old silver maple. Yeah, you might recall its appearance here in the sanctuary as a guest in one of my sermons. Miraculously, though, only one twig was harmed by the felled umbrella. Thanks be to God. But between that near-death experience and a wind chill of 16 degrees, I quickly began my emergency extraction. I moved the various potted plants inside, hands dirty and freezing, only to discover when I'd finished that Higgins, our curious cat, had uprooted my tiny rescue sapling, the Japanese cherry I had just brought inside from the cold. A couple months earlier, I had found it growing in the crack of a curb on the same corner where an intrepid Norway maple has been growing out of the storm drain for the past few years. I saw the familiar leaves, tiny as they were. I scanned it with my plant app, and upon confirmation, I dug it up and carried it home and introduced it to its new penthouse planter with gorgeous views of the sunset and a bevy of other sapling neighbors. Earlier this year, the city had chopped down all the Japanese cherries in the neighborhood, dealing death under the cover of blight control. It was a tree that made me think of Zoe, and seeing it then in miniature growing out of that curb, it felt like a gift and a metaphor of Zoe and life, a parable Jesus preached that just didn't make it into Matthew's final report. The kingdom of heaven is in your hands, he must have said. And now Higgins had ruined the ending, uprooting it in one fell swoop. Or maybe he was taking literally that lost parable I'd only recently found in my heart. There's something about life that once you begin to tend it, the more it gets under your fingernails and your claws, the more you see it everywhere and want to start dealing in it, the more curious you become and the more you discover just how contagious it is. We know death and despair can be contagious. Fear and hatred too. Grievance and grumbling and greed can sweep us up, and suddenly we've uprooted friendships and reputations and entire value systems we used to hold dear. As easy and quickly as things can change, the blink of an eye, a gust of wind, the swipe of a paw or baton or bomb in the Caribbean, it's a wonder life ever wins out at all. Goodness either. Justice, kindness, hope. We know they are there, but they can be so hard to see sometimes. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is that way. A mustard seed. So minuscule you'll probably lose it in your pocket. Yeast, just ordinary baking powder that vanishes if you use it correctly. A pearl buried under a pile of hand-me-downs and knickknacks, a treasure lost to overgrowth and time and left undiscovered, a sapling, just a weed among weeds, stretching up through a curb you pass by every day. So small, so unassuming, so insignificant, so often ignored. Jesus says the kingdom of heaven is like this. Like these delicate, commonplace things that don't announce God's presence with chariots and loudspeakers, but in flour and dust mites and the dirt under our fingernails. And maybe that is what's so surprising about what Jesus is saying here. Not just how tiny these things are and how ordinary they are, but how unnoticed they are too. How seemingly helpless they are. Or at least how dependent they are on other factors, light and water and soil. A baker's dollop, a savvy shopper, a keen explorer. And it makes me wonder, just wonder, if that isn't his point. The kingdom of heaven, like God's very self, is here, is everywhere, if only we would slow down and notice, if only we would stop talking and listen. If only we would pitch in and do our part, whatever the size or impact we think it will or won't have. After all, how many wonders has God planted in my life that I've overlooked because they didn't turn out like I wanted or didn't grow as quickly as I was expecting? How many glimpses of the kingdom of heaven have I missed because I was looking for something bigger or louder or clearer? How many sacred gifts have remained dormant? Things like kindness and courage and love. Not because God was absent, but because I didn't tend them. It's an important Sunday, being Stewardship Sunday. But sometimes we talk about being good stewards of our personal finances, of our church's budget and building and ministries, and we think that that is all it means. And maybe today seems an odd time to be speaking of seeds with winter approaching. Maybe, too, of financial gifts when the economy is lagging, and notions of hope when the state of our democracy seems so brittle. But Jesus was speaking in similar circumstances of oppression and authoritarianism, of uncertainty and wealth inequality. And he keeps pointing us back to the rolling pin and the thrift store and those dense thickets teeming with life and buried treasures. And I wonder with you this morning, what if stewardship is about more than just money? And what if it isn't dependent on our circumstances or its timing? What if it's about tending life? What if your gifts this morning and next year and the years after that aren't about specific dollar figures, as much as they are about latent dreams yet to sprout into ministries and emerging opportunities waiting to be tried, your hidden potential waiting to be uncovered? What if justice and generosity grow side by side when we cultivate hope and wonder? What if that is your invitation this morning? To give, yes, but more than that, to believe. To believe that the kingdom of heaven is at work and is growing and alive within even you. And this underestimated church, and this hurting, scary, despairing world. The kingdom of heaven is expanding and unfolding, and sometimes all we can do to join in is to notice again and to listen again and to tend life again and again. Because there's just something about the kingdom of heaven that gets into your bones and your dreams, that dirties your glasses and scuffs up your shoes. This week, as I finished doing the dishes, I reached toward the windowsill to get some soap to scrub the grease and grime that had gotten under my fingernails. And right before my eyes, only a few inches tall, a tiny sapling was leaning in its pot. The only evidence that it was still alive was the leaves that had turned red and begun to fall off. And all those years before, I had paid attention to the blossoms of spring, but I'd never noticed the color of a Japanese cherry in autumn. The kingdom of heaven is like that.